Welcome back. All right, so today we're tackling our second topic of this unit. We're tackling the northern colonies. We took care of the southern colonies the other day. Now we're focusing on the northern colonies. The big thing that we want to think about is how the northern colonies are going to be different from the southern colonies. That's what we're getting to. That's what we're working up towards. What we're focusing in on right now is to what extent. That's one of our key words there. To what extent, how much or how little did religion define the northern colonies? Okay, so that's what we're focused in on today. So we took a look at the southern colonies yesterday, and we took a look at the main motivators behind the southern colonies. Okay, why the British are going to the Americas in the first place. We had fortune hunters, and when they couldn't find their fortunes because there wasn't any gold or silver, they set up tobacco plantations, stole the land from the Native Americans, and had themselves a good old time. The northern colonies are going to be very different. I don't know why that just came up. The northern colonies are going to be very different, as we're going to see. And the northern colonies are going to have a much more religious focus. Okay, so we want to think about where we are today in America. And America is many different countries. And there's a lot of different groups of people that make up America. And this is going to be one of those themes that we kind of go back through all year. One of the themes is the lust for wealth and power. And we definitely see a direct line with the very first settlers at Jamestown with the lust for wealth and power. In the North, you have a religiosity, a seeking out of freedom of religion, a place to practice and worship the way you want. We're going to see that looked a little different back in the colonial days from the idea that we have of it today. And that's going to be something else that goes into who we are as Americans. You have to remember, the First Amendment to our Constitution, one of our bedrock fundamental rights is freedom of religion. That's not a coincidence. That also comes from the early colonial period, as we're going to see today. So, let's talk about the northern colonies, and we need to understand, we've got to go back to Europe to understand the political situation in Europe at that time, to understand why it's going to happen the way it does. Now, go back to 1519, the year that Martin Luther nails the 95 Theses to the church door of Wittenberg, Germany, starting the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation is basically a gigantic world war. You have all the European countries fighting for each other. You have the countries that are loyal to the Pope that are fighting on the side of the Catholic Church, and you have countries that are trying to break free from the Catholic Church, basically establishing themselves. The Protestant Reformation is going to lead to the establishment of new churches in Europe, and it's going to be just as much something for political power as anything else, because those new monarchs, well, they're looking to free themselves from the Catholic Church because they want more power, and the Catholic Church had a lot of power. Some of them, however, some of these sects, some of these denominations of Christianity that are going to emerge during the Protestant Reformation are going to be kind of different, though. Some of them are going to be extremely religious, and some of them are going to take the ideas of the Bible and the ideas of religion extremely seriously. Calvinism is going to be one of those. It's going to be named after John Calvin. All right, John Calvin was from Geneva, which is in Switzerland. So let me actually pull up a map here. So we can see. So let's take a look at Protestant and Catholic countries, because I want you to visualize this. All right, this is a pretty good map here. Okay, so the blue is going to represent Protestant areas. Okay, the green is going to represent Catholic areas. So Protestantism is going to start here in Switzerland. Okay, this is where Calvinism is going to start, and as we can see, it's definitely in Catholic territory. Okay, and then he's going to spread north. So keep this in mind as we talk about this, because this is also going to be a big part of American identity, is when we talk about Christianity in America, especially early Christianity, we're talking about Protestantism. Catholicism is kind of like a dirty thing in the United States for a very long time. And as we're going to see in the late 1800s, when a lot of Catholics start immigrating into the United States in big numbers, they're going to be discriminated against every bit as much as any other group because they're going to be different. All right, so when we talk about Christianity at this time, we're talking about Protestant Christianity, mainly coming from Northern and Central Europe. So let's go back here. All right, John Calvin, he's from Geneva, he's from Switzerland, and Calvin is going to start this sect known as Protestantism, okay, or Calvinism, all right, named after him. This is going to be a very, very strict teaching, okay? He's basically going to preach that all men are born with sin and are naturally wicked. Just think about that. All right, somebody yelling at you, "You're a sinner. You're horrible. You're damned to hell." They also believed in something called predetermination. Basically, they believed that God had already determined who was going to heaven and who was going to hell. He already figured this out a long time before. So now it's just about everybody's here on life, and they're already determined. So what they would have to do is they would have to show that they were the chosen ones. All right, so if God already predetermined everybody, people had to prove that they were the chosen ones. They had to prove they were the good ones. So Calvin believed that, well, God already chose if you're damned or not, but you got to show other people that you're the one that you're the one of the chosen people of God. So basically, it's a very, very strict religion. It's 4 bare walls and a sermon. You go to church, and you go to church for a long time, and it's just no frills, just the preacher, screaming at you about damnation and hell for hours on end. Okay? That's what church is like for Calvinism. You're beating yourself up, you're dressing extremely plain. Something else to interesting, okay? So let's talk about fashion, for instance. Okay? If we go back to the time of the Renaissance, you got people dressing like this, King Louis XIV. All right, wearing clothes more ornate than any woman would wear today. Today, if we go into a department store, there is like 5 floors of clothes for women and a half a floor of clothes for men. Let's take a look at a men's suit. Okay? This is a very simple suit, and we get these ideas from Calvinism. All right? People should not show their wealth. Especially men. Men shouldn't show their wealth. That's why the men's suit today is the way it is. This is a holdover from Puritanism and Calvinism, where you are showing your humbleness, your humility before God. Now, men still like to show off their wealth, so what they would do is they would buy expensive clothes for their women, which is why today women have so many more clothes than men. It's a holdover from Calvinism. Okay, so it's the idea of the visible saint. All right, if in order to get into the church, you had to be a visible saint. You had to demonstrate your piety. You had to demonstrate just how devoted you were to God and that you were one of the chosen ones. So Calvin's followers in England are going to be known as the Puritans. Puritanism and Calvinism is like the same thing. 4 bare walls in a sermon. You got to be a visible saint, and we're going to make sure that we show our religiosity. We are the pure chosen ones of God. You are all damned. We are going to separate ourselves from you, and we're going to make sure that we live our way. We want to get away from all that unholy stuff back there. We want to get away from the ostentatious dress. We're going to dress simply. We're going to demonstrate every single day, every hour of our lives that we're dedicated to God. We're not going to do any of those evil things that they do in Europe or that they do in England. We're not going to go and we're not going to drink. You know, only evil people drink. We're not going to dance. Dancing's of the devil. Okay? We're not going to do any of that. We're going to work hard. We're going to work 16 hours a day. And then when we're not working, we're going to study the Bible. That's kind of what Calvinism is. That's what the Puritanism is. Now, these guys are going to be these guys are going to be kind of prudish, right? I mean, these guys are going around talking about damnation all day, talking about how everybody's going to hell, and, you know, they believe that, you know, dancing is the sign of the devil, that, you know, dressing nice is the sign of the devil, that you can't drink. Well, people in England and people in Europe are going to think these guys are going to be pretty boring, right? Especially after it's going to be King James I, who is the head of the Anglican Church in England. Now, you got to remember, at this time, the way a country became religious was if the king or queen became religious for that religion. There is no such thing as freedom of religion. You, as an ordinary person, can't decide what religion you are in England in the 1500s, in the 1600s. Okay, the king can decide, and when the king decides, well, guess what? You are that religion. So there's going to be a lot of discrimination against the Calvinists, and because the king was part of the Church of England, okay, then he said all the people have to be part of the Church of England. The Puritans, who did their own thing, were seen as outsiders, and they're different. And come on, these guys are like prudes, and these guys going around, you know, telling people they're going to hell, and, you know, they can't dance, they can't drink, they can't dress nice or anything like that. Nah, we got to get these guys out of here. So they saw them as a threat. So the Puritans are going to flee to Holland in 1608. That's the year after Jamestown is settled. We got to remember 1607 founding of Jamestown. All right. But when they got there, the Dutch are going to be even more open-minded than the British. You know, you do have to remember, you know, Amsterdam, Holland, that country. Today, that's the same place where marijuana and prostitution are legal. Okay, so they have different ideas than they had in England, and the Puritans, when they get there, okay, they're not being killed, they're not being persecuted against, but they realize that this is not a place where we want to raise our children. So what they did is they negotiated a place in America for the Puritans to settle. Okay, and they went abroad. And they went aboard the Mayflower to settle in the New World. The Mayflower is the boat, right? So they get on the Mayflower and they go off to settle the New World, where they can set up their own colony and they can worship God the way they want to, without anybody telling them what to do, without anybody yelling at them or anything like that. So that's how we get there. Now, they settled outside the limits of the Virginia Company, so they had no legal right to keep their colony, but that didn't stop them anyway. All right, so they're on the boat, the Mayflower, and they're on their way over. And they realize that, okay, well, we're going into a foreign wilderness. We have no idea what we're doing, so maybe we ought to come up with a plan. And they're going to sign this thing called the Mayflower Compact. Okay, super duper important. This goes along in your notes with the Virginia House of Burgesses. The Mayflower Compact is an agreement that is going to be signed by all of the major all the major men, okay, because, you know, come on, women don't have a voice at this time. So the men are going to sign this agreement that they would establish a government where the majority of men would have a say in things. So it's basically ruled by democracy as long as you're a man, and as long as you have a family. All right, again, this is another step towards self-government in the colonies, the same as the Virginia House of Burgesses. This is the beginning of democracy in America. Okay, so they signed the Mayflower Compact, and then when they get this, so they set up the plan on when they get to the New World and how they're going to rule things. Then they actually get to the Americas, all right? So we have to understand something. The first pilgrims that were coming here were coming to settle. Okay? They're not coming to get rich like in Virginia. In Virginia, you have mostly men that are traveling over, mostly men that are seeking their fortunes. They were going for their gold at first, and when they couldn't find their gold, well, then they went and they stole, and finally they settled in tobacco plantations. It's not going to be like that, okay? If we take a look at this image is extremely racist. But we do see that we do have some women that are in it. We have families that are coming over. Okay, so we have families that are coming over, Puritan families that are coming over here in order to basically settle. This is going to be their new home. Okay, they come in the winter of 1620. And winters back then are going to be very, bad. There were no houses. There's no central heating. There's no place to live. You got to build it all. Okay. Also, they have to learn how to grow crops. And we're up in New England. They settled in what's now Massachusetts. The soil is very rocky. The winters are very cold and very long. It's not the South. It's tougher to live up there. And it's very tough to, especially when you're just getting started. So in 1620, only 1 in 40, in 1620 to 1621, only 44 out of 102 survived. All right. So in other words, this first winter is going to be very grueling for them. And then after that, the 44 that are left, they got to find some way to live. Basically, they're trying the methods that they learned back in Europe, and they're just not working. The wheat isn't taking. And the Native Americans basically look at the pitiful settlers that are starving to death, and they take pity on them. They bring them food, and they show them how to plant the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash. And over that spring and summer, the natives kind of take them under their wing. And because of that, we're able to have the first successful Thanksgiving. Okay, and that's going to be in 1621. And basically, with the Indians' help, the settlers are going to be able to take care of themselves. Now, this is the Thanksgiving that we have in kind of our contemporary understanding of things. And let's just take a look at things. It's like here we have the Europeans, and they all look happy and healthy, and everybody's all happy and healthy. Look, they even got their little dog here, and it looks like they've been out hunting. And they go and they make the food, and look, they're sharing the food with the Native Americans. Now we know that anything but this is true. The Europeans are starving to death. Okay, so imagine their clothing torn, emaciated, gaunt. Basically, they look underfed. They're not going to have anything like this nice here because they got to most of their time spent on trying to get food. The natives aren't the ones down here. The natives are the ones helping them out. The natives are the ones teaching them how to survive. So if anything, the actual scene would be very different. We got to think about who's making this. This is definitely, let's put it this way. It's not a Native American painting this picture. Can we see that? This is going to be painted after the fact by some white person who's going to basically perpetuate the ideas that the Pilgrims are going to be all nice guys and they're helping out the Native Americans. Now, one from the Native Americans Pilgrims died. All right, so Plymouth is going to be the first colony. All right, that's going to be the Calvinists. That's going to be the Puritans. Then there's going to be more moderate Puritans coming over. The Plymouth Puritans are going to be extremists. 4 bare walls in a sermon, none of this, none of that, no dancing. Think like that. Then the more moderate Puritans are going to flee England during the English Civil War, which is going to kind of come up at this time, and that's going to be 1629. So you got more moderate people coming over. You got more moderate people saying, well, yeah, we should read the Word of God, and we should follow the Word of the Bible. But, if I go dancing on Sunday, that's not a sign I'm with the devil. Or what if I want to wear some nice clothes? Or what if I want to have a drink of whiskey every once in a while? These are the more moderate people. They're going to settle nearby in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which is going to now, we now know that as the city of Boston. Okay, eventually you're going to have about 70,000 refugees leaving England, and 20,000 of those 70,000 are going to settle in Massachusetts. Oops, go back. John Winthrop, a name you need to know. John Winthrop, Massachusetts Bay. John Winthrop, Massachusetts Bay. John Winthrop, Massachusetts Bay. John Winthrop, Massachusetts Bay. You get that? Okay. John Winthrop is going to found the colony of, he's going to be the founder of Massachusetts Bay Colony. He's going to be their leader. He was an attorney and a manor lord. Okay, so he was definitely a middle-class stock, going over to set up a new life. All right. Basically, Massachusetts is going to flourish not by tobacco. The land is too poor in Massachusetts. They're not going to grow tobacco. They're going to flourish through the fur trade and also by fishing and shipbuilding. Okay, so if we take a look at this scene is going to be very much apropos. Apropos is a word that means in regards to or shows us what life in New England is going to be like. All right, the land is not going to be as good, so we're going to rely on the sea. These guys are going to become manufacturers and traders. Okay, first in the animal pelts, and then they're going to establish the trading, fishing, and basically in the north is where we're going to have all of the major seaports, and the north is going to where all the major trade centers are. Okay? Now, let's talk about the management of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. All right, all freedmen, all right, free means you were not a slave, you were not a servant. All right, they were adult males who belonged to the Puritan congregations, had a say in colonial affairs. So, in other words, one second. All right, so all free adult men who belonged to the church had a say in affairs. Again, that sounds a lot like democracy, okay? But it wasn't a full democracy, and as we're going to see, it's going to take a long time for a full democracy to develop. All right, if you were not a church man, so if you did not belong to a church, you did not have a say or a vote, okay? Voting was restricted to the visible saint men. All right, so the people who were the visible saints, the people who belonged to the church, that were the hardcore people, they were the ones that were making the decisions for everybody else. So it was enforced. They had to enforce godly law on non-believers and believers alike. Okay, so we're going to tell you what to do, and everybody had to pay taxes to support the church. So you had the church-faring men that were making the decisions, and the church-faring men are putting those decisions in place for the non-church-faring men. Okay, so we can already start to see how, yes, things are going to be more free, but there are problems that are setting up here. And that's something that we're going to think about, because these are things that are going to come together. But for now, we can go back to our focus question. Too far. We can go back to our focus question, which is, to what extent did religion define New England colonies? Okay? Remember, we need to be detailed in our response. If you're not talking about Calvinism or Puritanism in your response, you got problems. Okay? As always, you have any questions or anything like that, shoot me an email before 9 o'clock, and I will be glad to get back to you. Enjoy it. Good luck, and we'll see you tomorrow.